and welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions, the channel where we look to answer exactly those. I'm Rebecca Felgate, and today we are talking about the hotly debated subject as to whether ghosts are real or whether they're something our minds have made up in the search for answers about the afterlife. So, are ghosts real? In this video we are going to be talking about what happens when we die, the feeling of being watched, and a few ghost sightings, asking ourselves whether there is any hard evidence to be noted. So, what happens when we die? Science and the rule of thermodynamics teaches us that matter cannot be created or destroyed, it can only change forms. Energy, matter and mass remain constant. This means even though we die, we are never physically disappearing, merely changing into something else. After death, our matter is absorbed by our surroundings. For example, if left to decompose in a field, our body would be absorbed by animals and plant life around us. They in turn would take energy from our absorption. Okay, so that's our body, but what about our soul? Some agree with the rules of thermodynamics, but believe that our energy is our spirit, which is somehow able to leave our body and live forever in the universe as a constant. In other words, the body may rot and all its nutrients may be absorbed by the earth, but the spirit lives on. This is very difficult to prove or disprove, but does this mean that ghosts are real? Some say the spirit travels to a better or indeed worse place. Some say it's absorbed by the environment, and some say it haunts the earth as a ghost, an imprint of who we were when we were alive. To accept this is to accept spirits as a notion exist and are able to travel to different planes or indeed remain. I mean, it sounds far-fetched, but we cannot argue with the number of reports of bright lights coming from those who have had near-death experiences and from those talking to loved ones as they pass on. Some even report flying over fields or even seeing angels. Does this mean that there is an afterlife? If there is an afterlife, does it mean that some souls don't quite make it there? On top of the bright light dilemma, a scientist by the name of Duncan McDougall spent the early part of the 1900s trying to determine the weight of a soul. He measured terminally ill patients just before they passed and just after, noting a loss of 21 grams at the moment of death. Dr. McDougall attributed this loss, observed with scary accuracy, to the soul leaving the body, concluding that this must be how much a soul weighs. Over 100 years later, does this discovery still hold up? Well, not exactly. What McDougall didn't account for is that just before death, bodies heat up, giving off moisture as they sweat. Some even lose bowel control, and again, this could be a factor to the weight loss. Although, why was a weight of 21 grams recorded in almost all patients? Surely not all of them undergo the same loss. Okay, so let's get back to those bright lights. Scientific examination of brain function in the moments before death have noted a strong and sudden surge in brain activity, which could lead to hallucinations such as bright lights and floating figures. This same brain activity is present in people who have had near-death experiences and have gone on to explain them. Okay, so enough of souls as a general term for a moment. Let's consider those allegedly trapped souls, ghosts, and indeed the feeling of being watched. Even the most logical and scientific of people will have had at some point in their life an experience of being watched. Known as psychopaestesis or the psychic staring effect, the feeling of someone staring at us is largely rooted in paranoia and anxiety. Humans are hardwired to feel like someone is watching them, even when there's nobody there, especially if they are in an unfamiliar environment. Okay, so we may be able to lend an explanation to the feeling like we're not alone and the feeling like we're being watched, but what about being able to sense a certain emotion in a place or a building? First conceived by British archaeologist Thomas Charles Lethbridge in 1961, real stone tape theory is one of my favourite ideas I've come across when researching this topic. While I explain this, I want you to remember our earlier scientific point that energy cannot be destroyed. With real stone tape theory, it is speculated that ghosts and hauntings are comparable to tape recordings. The theory says that electrical and mental energy is released during traumatic events and absorbed in rocks, walls, and other items. Some say they can even be replayed under certain conditions. This replay could be considered a haunting as we know it. Scientifically, energy absorption is way more understandable than a replay of events. It is possible that the walls inside Auschwitz, for example, absorbed high emotional energy from those contained within them. Is this why, when we visit a place known to have a dramatic and bloodthirsty past, we have a certain physical reaction to being there? It's almost as if we can feel the despair and suffering of those who were there in the past. But we must ask ourselves, is this because of the residual energy from tortured souls, or is it simply because we know what took place here? Once again, is it our mind that is doing the haunting? So far, it seems that we have had at least some scientific understanding of what we would consider a paranormal experience. It is true that we never have been able to scientifically prove the existence of ghosts, but let us look at what evidence we do have in favor of their presence. Now is the time we are going to discuss ghost sightings. Countless people over the millennia have reported seeing ghosts. Indeed, 1 in 3 Americans are convinced of their existence, and over 2,000 ghost hunting groups operate across the United States.
It's right here, Ray. It's looking at me.
It is very difficult to determine what is an, air quote, legitimate report of a ghost sighting and what is a fake for attention. Again, photo evidence is not totally reliable, as it is possible for images to be tampered with, as we know they have been in the past. It is also very difficult to know what environment a picture was taken in. For example, that ghostly figure could be a smudged lens or a trick of the light. Instead, we will look at video, again, air quote, evidence of ghost, which is somewhat harder, but not impossible to fake. Let us look at the case of the abandoned Horton mine in Nevada. An explorer walks in, a chain begins swinging for no apparent reason, and the explorer experiences a feeling of pure terror and a sudden temperature drop. The feeling of dread was indeed also something documented by lab worker and lecturer Vic Tandy, who thought a laboratory he was working in Coventry, UK, was haunted after he began feeling depressed and cold, while at the same time curiously sweaty. One day when Tandy was polishing his fencing sword, he noticed the blade vibrating. This led him to discover that infrasound was present in the lab and was coming from an extractor fan. He then discovered that infrasound of around 19 Hz can have a psychological effect on humans, causing them to feel anxious and fearful. The rest the mind is happy to fill in. Tandy then went to join a paranormal activity group that led to the discovery of infrasound in many buildings considered to be haunted. We can't blame it all on infrasound, of course. What of these old creepy houses that people move into only to begin to experience paranormal activity? There are 2 other explanations here, which are incidentally 2 very common factors in old buildings: toxic mold and carbon monoxide leaks from old boilers. Both can have hallucinogenic effects on those exposed to them. Could carbon monoxide have played a role in the feeling in the abandoned mine? So what else? While this is a vast topic, the last thing we're going to discuss in this video is the ability to speak to the dead. If we can talk to them, then ghosts must be real, right? Take for example the Ouija board, also known as a spirit board or talking board. This is a method used to contact the dead. In theory, the board works by spirits leading those contacting them to spell out various messages. Indeed, there have been many instances from which people are convinced they've been able to speak to the spirits. But have they? The moving of the pointer can be explained by the ideomotor effect, a phenomena that is explained by users subconsciously manipulating the movement. Could a similar notion of subconscious impulse be at play with mediums, or indeed, could they be playing off our own subconscious suggestions and reactions? Or can they truly reach out to our long-lost loved ones? So ghosts. We have discovered a few key for and against points for the past 10 or so minutes. Can we now reach a conclusion as to whether or not they're real? For almost all of these paranormal experiences, we can find a scientific explanation. There is simply no hard evidence to prove the existence of ghosts. There is actually far more evidence to prove the existence of life on Mars. That said, millions of people will swear blind that ghosts exist, although perhaps it's easier to come to terms with the idea that they do rather than the idea that they don't. At least if they did, we would have some concept as to what happens to us after we die. The thought of a soul out there, lost or otherwise, is far easier to come to terms with than our own extinction, nothingness. Lights out. Are ghosts real? Probably not, but who is to know for sure? Perhaps ghosts aren't real, but then maybe we're just going about them all wrong. Many believe in multiverse dimensions. Are ghosts instead not souls of the dead, but beings operating in a different dimension that just so happen to collide with ours in space? A wild theory indeed, and perhaps something we could explore in another episode of Life's Biggest Questions. Cold, misty nights. The kind of night where you aren't sure whether it's your breath that you're seeing in front of you or the incessant fog. The kind of night where you just want to make it home and warm up by the fire, but first you have to get there. As you try, you hear the soft clip-clopping of hooves in the distance, but they get louder and louder until you see a figure, but it can't be. Where's its head? Hello and welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions, the channel that loves to do a bit of theorizing on basically anything and everything, because we know that no question is too stupid and that curiosity didn't kill the cat, it only made it wiser. I'm your host Rebecca Felgate, and today we're getting spooky as I ask, what if the Headless Horseman was real? Before we ride on into this video, I want to ask you guys if you have ever seen a ghost. Let me know in the comment section down below. Also, while you're down there, why don't you like this video and share it with a friend? And if you want to connect with the team on social media, there are links to our Instagram in the description box. So, the legend of the Headless Horseman is some kind of unification between American folklore and actual history, the way most legends are born. The Headless Horseman has become a bit of a horror trope, but the story seems to date back to Dutch settlers along New York State's Hudson River. It seems that during the Revolutionary War, Hessian horsemen were deployed by the British Army. During one battle, a fearsome fighter went into war on his horse, only to have his head blown off by a cannon. The man was said to have been quickly buried in a churchyard of Sleepy Hollow because the Dutch settlement was most like the homeland. Ever since, it is said that on some nights of the year, he rides out to seek his head or take the head of someone else to replace the one he lost, maybe as a final act of revenge. A further legend has the Headless Horseman spiriting away local townsmen. So, what if this spook was real? Let's get one thing straight. The Headless Horseman is scary, sure, but he seems pretty local. If he were real, he would likely just haunt the town of Sleepy Hollow, which sits in the Hudson Valley, just a 46-minute drive from Manhattan. If he did escape and gallop forth, then maybe there is a small chance of the undead spirit clip-clopping his ghost horse to NYC, although that would likely take the best part of a day, or at least an afternoon on horseback. If that were the case, the city of 8.6 million people would likely have time to prepare for the spectre. But let's just for fun imagine that the Headless Horseman goes rogue in Central Park and rides through deserted Times Square, leaving none but a trail of decapitated heads behind him. Maybe residents could all evacuate onto boats on the Hudson River and watch as he rides the shores. Ghost horsemen can't clop on water, can they? I don't think so. Okay. So like the Headless Horseman is devastated that his head was blown off and is constantly searching for it and chopping off other heads in revenge. I get it, he's pretty upset. It's a gnarly way to die. The act of severing a head is still one of the worst ways humans can envisage death, which is perhaps why legends of the Horseman have stuck around for so long. It is a pretty powerful visual. I'm thinking, why can't we just make him a new head? Can we 3D print a little something for him? Would he like that? Maybe he would. If we knew who he was, maybe we could do a little head reconstruction. Would that make him happy, or would he get even angrier? How much danger would we really be in if the Horseman was real, and would we even know about it? For one man and his horse, I doubt that he could cause the amount of chaos I alluded to in Manhattan, right? He's local, like I said. In the legend, he searches for his own head, or steals others, or spirits people away. I guess we would notice how serious he is about this when people started going missing or headless bodies started being found. But one question, if the Headless Horseman became such from being peed off about losing his head, wouldn't killing others in the same way create a whole new breed of angry headless spirits? Would they not stop until everyone was headless, and then what then? Would we just have a big headless ghost party? If the Headless Horseman were real and was able to decapitate unsuspecting humans, then that would mean something more serious. It would mean that ghosts are real, and it would mean that they could effectively get you, which would be pretty worrying. This would extend beyond the realms of just the Horseman. Amid the panic at this revelation, I imagine that seers and spiritualists naturalists would be able to make a quick buck selling anti-ghost amulets or protection spells. Goodbye Headless Horseman, hello capitalism. I would say that we need to get a ghost hunter in to negotiate with the horseman. Like, what can we do to quell his bloody rampage? The problem is though, Ed Warren is dead and Lorraine's pretty old. I'm wondering who out there would be up for the job. So before we wrap up this video, I feel like we need to talk a little more about Sleepy Hollow. There's a whole town out there that believes the legend of the Headless Horseman. Listen to this.
Has the Headless Horseman been seen in and around these parts?
Yes, as a matter of fact, he has been seen within the last few days.
Really?
Right, well, if that's the case and he is real, he hasn't done too much damage in the past 100 or so years, so why don't we just leave him to it? Headless Horsemans deserve a bit of peace too, right?
The skies grow dark. The flames burn bright. None shall escape the horseman's sight. Ha 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 ha
The Ring, a world in which a videotape can carry a legitimate curse condemning you to your ultimate demise, and a scary dead, non-dead girl climbing out of your television set coming to throttle you. Lucky it isn't real because it sounds pretty awful. But what if it was? Hello and welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions, the channel that likes to answer a plethora of queries, no matter how crazy, because curiosity and imagination are two of the greatest characteristics to have. I'm your host Rebecca Felgate, and today I'm asking, what if the ring was real? Before we get into this video, I want to ask you guys what you would do if Samara and the curse of the videotape were real. I've got some schemes up my sleeve that I'm gonna let you know. Also, do let me know what scares you the most. For me, it has to be little girl ghosts, so this video is pretty intense. As I said though, tricks up that sleeve. Also, while you're down there leaving me a comment, why don't you like this video and share it with a friend you want to scare today. Also, why don't you click on that subscription button, because you aren't gonna want to miss the month of spooks we have planned running up to Halloween. Okay, if the ring was real, then it would mean that a malevolent, possibly demonic, incarnate preteen girl called Samara was adopted by an infertile woman, and somehow her traumatic life and death left a curse upon us and the world. This curse will then have materialized in the form of a videotape that, if watched, curses the viewers to die within 7 days, unless they make a copy and show it to someone else, who in turn will die if they don't copy it and show it, and so on and so forth. Cursed people will be notified by telephone call, which is pretty polite if you ask me. And then, if nothing's done, the ghost of Samara will climb out of a television and come to murder you. Yikes! Or at least that's how things were in the early noughties in the dwindling era of the videotape. But like, come on, it's nearly 2019. Nobody even watches a VHS these days. In fact, some people watching this video may have never watched a VHS in their lives. God, I'm old. If the ring was real and you were cursed, I'm not sure it would be so easy to trick people into watching a videotape to save your life. If someone, these days, tried to pass one off on me, I'd be like, sorry mate, I haven't owned a VHS player in about 15 years. Would this not be a green light to burn all VHSs forever? They're defunct now anyway. Burn them, get rid of them. See you later, Samara. But ho, no. I'm guessing the ghost of old Sam ain't no technophobe. The curse probably had a DVD phase. Remember those? And now we're living in the age of MP4 curses. Curses we can share on our phones. How do you even copy an MP4 anyway? You download it and re-upload it, I guess, and this kinda breaks my high quality video enjoying heart. In the age of 4K video, Samara's piddly little 240p offering will be super low quality, bless her pixelated cotton socks. I guess one way to avoid the trap of being shown the cursed video is only watch content in HD. You can actually see a little symbol when you search up videos, it'll have HD next to it. Basically, avoid all others. Done. Although I have to say, I'm sure some twazzock may have given the grainy old footage an HD rendering. So, to rid yourself of the curse, you have to show someone else the video, right? What if there are malicious curse supporters out there who, say, hack cable networks or popular YouTubers and post the video to an audience of thousands or millions? Are we all screwed then? Will we all be infected? Is this how the world ends? Would we need a mass boycott of television? Would it just be safer to gouge out our eyes? Dark. Maybe our clickbait culture would embrace a curse. YouTubers like Jake and or Logan Paul would release videos like, OMG, I'm cursed. Remember in The Ring where every cursed person appears blurry in photographs? I wonder if that also applies to videos. Imagine how many views a cursed blurry host would get. trust the pools to try it. It is, after all, every day, bro. Or every day for 7 days. The thing is though, with their vast platforms, it would be easy for them to pass on the curse and survive once they milked it. But they even feel a sense of responsibility for those they infected. But you know what? Hold on a second and wait, guys. Things have changed a lot since 2002. That phone call that cursed people would get? In the age of caller ID, why don't we just block unknown numbers? Haha, can't warn me now. I guess that sneaky ghost could send an SMS or a WhatsApp though. Stop sliding into my DMs, Samara, you creep. Okay, but I actually think that I've cracked it. Samara crawls out of a TV, right? 2002 was the time and age of the big bulky television. It was a status thing. People do still have the odd widescreen, sure, but these days the majority of content is watched on our phone or a tablet. Sure, Samara could crawl out of a widescreen, but good luck getting your wide load through my regular sized iPhone 8, babe. The best thing she could do is poke a few fingers through. Unless, I guess, she could come out as a tiny sized Samara, in which case, can't we just stamp on her? To be honest though, even if she appeared full size and we were ready for her, can't we shoot her or something? Ooh, new Life's Biggest Questions video for you. What if we nuked Samara from the ring? To be honest, at this point, I'm only half joking. In the Ring novels, the curse is actually a smallpox virus, which somehow plagues itself upon viewers of the video. Can we find a cure? If the Samara curse was our first ever digital pandemic, surely we would pool our energies into finding a cure. I believe in the power of science over the power of little dead girl spooks any day. One final thought for you. Is anyone worried about how Samara managed to somehow unleash a powerful curse via videotape anyway? On a rewatch, the details are kind of sketchy, but they involve her using evil psychic abilities and mind control manipulation to burn images into objects. If she can do that, I'm sure that she isn't the only one. If she has mind control powers, does that mean that other people do too? What wider implications are here? Does this mean that witchcraft is real? Ghosts are real? If the ring was real, this opens up a whole can of spooky supernatural worms that I'm not sure I'm ready to deal with. So, to conclude, if the ring was real, we would basically either need to accept it and gouge out our eyes, rid ourselves of all playable tech, or find a way to eradicate the curse. I know which I'd prefer, but which would you? Bloody Mary is both a delicious vodka cocktail and a scary ghost that appears in a mirror when her name is called 3 times. Sometimes she curses people, sometimes she strangles them, sometimes she drinks their blood, and sometimes she simply steals their souls. Of course, she's just a spooky story passed on by kids and teens who want to freak each other out. But what if she wasn't? Hello and welcome back to Life's Biggest Questions, the channel that looks to answer a wide variety of queries, be they historical, scientific, mythical, or theoretical. I'm your host Rebecca Felgate, and today I'm asking, what if Bloody Mary was real? Before we peer into this video, I just want to ask you guys to hit that thumbs up button and also let me know if you believe in Bloody Mary. I'm actually very interested to read your comments on this one. Do you believe in it? I don't think I do. So the legend of spooky old Bloody Mary seemed to originate in Britain in the 1700s. Sometimes she's associated with Mary Tudor, Queen of England, but often she's simply a ghost of her very own being. There are variants surrounding the ritual to invoke her spirit. In the legend's early days, young women would try and walk backwards up the stairs holding a hand mirror and a candle. When they got to the top, they were supposed to be able to see their husband's face in the mirror, unless, that is, they saw a skull, which meant they would die before they had the chance to marry. In more modern times, kids and teens of all genders would simply chant her name to summon the ghost. It's usually done in a dark room lit only by candlelight as a person repeatedly chants Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary into a mirror. After some time, she would then appear as a witch or a corpse in the reflection. Some say they simply see the apparition, whilst others claims that she will harm you in some way. So what if she was real? Firstly, mate, just don't summon her. Honey only seems to come when ritualistically summoned. Pop those candles away and maybe don't go chanting into those mirrors. It seems simple, right? Well, perhaps if Bloody Mary was real and all summoning her took was a chant, some candles and a mirror, we might all be a bit more wary around reflective surfaces. In some cultures, they believe the dead are able to see us through mirrors, and indeed mirrors have long since been the subject of superstitions. For example, the 7 years bad luck rule for breaking one. Maybe if Bloody Mary was real, we may find a way to summon more spirits using a good old mirror and a candle. Who knows who else we could talk to over the bathroom sink? Also, if Bloody Mary were real in the original folklore sense, what hold does she have over our husbands? How does she know what they look like? What if you wanted a wife? If Mary has the power to curse us, then does that mean that other people can do it too? Would this mean that other ghosts and ghouls are real? If I was in charge of a country and Bloody Mary was real, I would ban the summoning, and if that didn't work, maybe I'd ban mirrors, and perhaps this would encourage a new era of anti-vanity. Although I guess we could use our phone cameras to check our appearance. But wait, could Bloody Mary get us through our phones too? I bet nobody has tried that yet because everyone's all about the mirrors. But if so, could her ghost go like actually viral? Could she start haunting our tech? Would it be like a 2018 episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer where a person unwittingly uploads a ghoul to the internet? I'm kind of here for it. Can we control old Delete Mary? All of these what ifs, but in some versions of the tale, Bloody Mary was real. She was Mary the First Queen of England, a woman with a very sad history of lovelessness and neglect. Mary the First was the child of Catherine of Aragon. She saw her father divorce her mother because she hadn't produced a male heir. She saw her stepmother cruelly smear her name, and rumour has it she suffered from awful menstrual cramps. Mary's only shortfalling seemed to be the fact that she was female. Later, she disposed of her competition for the crown and began brutally trying to reform the British Church, garnering her the nickname Bloody Mary. The woman entered into a marriage with a man who didn't love her, and she had a false pregnancy, perhaps tying up the real historical figure with the folklore that seems to have its roots in femininity, marriage, loss, sadness, and vengeance. She was very real, and it would be quite something if her scorn extended nearly 500 years into the future. Many people swear they've seen Bloody Mary by looking in the mirror, but so far as we know, ghosts aren't real, so how can we explain this? Well, there is scientific reasoning behind the phenomena. It is something psychologists call the strange face illusion. Basically, staring into a mirror for a long time can cause a person to hallucinate. As the eyes struggle to deal with the intensity of prolonged staring, the brain begins to visualize things that aren't there. It can cause the face to appear to melt or see other strange faces we don't recognize to be ourselves. Other explanations include hysteria and self-hypnosis, which makes sense. Bloody Mary might not be real, but our brains are powerful enough to invent her in our own minds. So guys, what do you think would happen if Bloody Mary was real? Who was she? What's her story? Is she indeed the jilted former Queen of England, or is she the devil incarnate? Let me know in the comments section down below. The Boogeyman, a scary creep from your worst nightmares, an ominous figure across many cultures whose main purpose seems to be to scare children. Is the Boogeyman a figment of the imagination, or is there some truth behind the stories? Hello and welcome back to Spooktober here at Life's Biggest Questions, where we are basically on a ghost ship sailing through a sea of ghouls this month. I'm your host or captain, Rebecca Felgate, and today I'm asking, is the Boogeyman real? Before we get into this video, I just want to ask you guys whether or not you are afraid of the Boogeyman, or if you were afraid when you were a kid. Also, while you're down there, why don't you leave a thumbs up on this video and hit that notification bell to be the first to hear big answers. If you want to connect with anyone that went into making this video, there are links to our social media in the description box. In North America, the Boogeyman is a monster created with the specific intention of scaring children into good behaviour. In the UK, I guess some people also talk about the Boogeyman, and also this character is widely reflected across a lot of cultures. For example, in Spain and Portugal, kids are afraid of the Sack Man, or perhaps El Coco. In Eastern Europe, Babu might get you, and in Germany, an evil known Bootserman may come watching you from dark corners. In some translations, the Boogeyman is simply the devil. As so many cultures have a scary figure that goes bump in the night, it's hard to pinpoint the exact origin of the Boogeyman. It seems more like the natural embodiment of childlike fear, a personification of all things that scare and worry a child. Giving it a name makes understanding the fear easier. There is a reason why we become less and less afraid of the Boogeyman as we get older. It's because we grow out of it and find ways to manage and cope with the things that worry us. Does that mean that the Boogeyman isn't real though? Well, we already discussed how the juvenile child's brain invents the Boogeyman as a personification of all their fears, but to be fair, there are a lot of people out there that prey on the vulnerability of children. It's easier for sick maniacs to abduct, manipulate, and/or harm children because they are vulnerable. They can't fight back or run as fast, they're not as strong or as savvy. Throughout history, there have been bad people out there looking to abuse their power. Let's have a look at some for example. In the late 1800s, the term Boogeyman was applied by the press to a horrid man in Manhattan and beyond by the name of Albert Fish. Fish garnered a reputation for kidnapping, killing, and eating children. He said, "I never ate any roast turkey that tasted half as good." What a creep. Luckily, the man was apprehended after admitting that he had murdered and ate children in every state of the United States of America. In January 1936, after a near 60-year murdering spree, he was executed. And while the physical manifestation of the boogeyman died with him that day, the concept of an evil child catcher lived on. And of course, he was not the first or the last of the real-life creeps. Some have also been dubbed the real boogeyman by the press. There was also Cropsey, the Staten Island boogeyman who kidnapped and killed children in the 70s and 80s, the Jersey Beast who raped and killed children between 1960 and 1971. This horrible man even also once played Santa Claus at a community home. There was also the Moors murderers in the UK, and the most prolific child killer reported in history, Colombian Louis Garavito, who killed 147 young boys and was active until he was caught in 1999. Basically, there are real creeps out there. Fun side note, there is an American wrestler called the Boogeyman out there. He has been with WWE since 2004 and is 6 foot and 2 inches tall, 260 pounds, and is scary to look at. That being said, he, like the Boogeyman in folklore, is just a character. Is the boogeyman real in a demonic monster sense? Well, not if you mean some otherworldly elf or creature, no. At least there is no evidence to suggest as much. But you don't need to be from a book or a work of fiction to be a monster, as we've discussed. There might not be a scary child catcher or gobbler lurking in the shadows of your bedroom or under your bed, but there are scary people out there in the wider world that we should be aware of. Does that mean we should live our lives in fear of the real boogeyman? No. It means that we should have a good awareness of safety and teach kids to stay away from strangers, and also what to do if they are ever in danger.
The oceans on our Earth are absolutely beautiful, but they are also absolutely unforgiving, which is why sailing is not for everyone. With the vastness of our oceans, it is easy for ships and people to get lost and for their stories to go down with them. We've got a lot to talk about on today's Life's Biggest Questions video, so let's just get right into it. I am your host today, Olivia Kozlowski, and I am going to be taking you through the top 10 mysterious ghost ships that disappeared. Starting off at our number 10 spot, we have the CARROLL A. Deering. On July 19th, 1920, the CARROLL A. Deering picked up its cargo of coal and set out for delivery to Rio de Janeiro, but on the way the captain fell quite ill, so the ship had to turn back and port nearby in order to drop him off and get another captain on board. This captain was Captain Willis B. Wormel, who was a retired 66-year-old sea captain, and his first mate was Charles B. McClellan. By the time September rolled around, the Deering was back on track for Rio and the coal was delivered with no issues. While docked in Rio, however, Captain Wormel apparently met with an old friend and spoke of his crew on the ship with a bit of disdain, although he did like the ship's engineer, Herbert Bates. On the way home, the ship stopped for supplies in Barbados and there was more gossip, but this time it was between the first mate and another captain, with the first mate talking smack about Captain Wormel. So clearly there was some tension on the ship, which sucks because you have nowhere to go. Anyway, on January 28, 1921, the ship was sighted by the Cape Lookout lightship off North Carolina, and the lightship's keeper said that someone with a megaphone on the Deering said that the ship had lost its anchor and asked for the keeper to notify the owners of the Deering, but unfortunately the lightship's radio was out, so no call was ever made. On January 31st, the ship was spotted in what is known as the Graveyard of the Atlantic, but because of bad weather it wasn't boarded until February 4th. Once people got on the boat, however, it was clear that the ship had been completely abandoned. The steering equipment was found to be damaged and the wheel was shattered. The ship's log and navigation equipment were gone, along with all personal belongings and the ship's 2 lifeboats. Since this discovery, at least 5 separate government agencies have tried to figure out what could have possibly happened here and what happened to the entire crew, but it remains a mystery to this day. Because of all of the drama, mutiny is suspected to be the most likely explanation, but still, where is the rest of the crew who potentially overthrew the captain? It is likely we may never know the events that took place during those months on the ship. In our number 9 spot today we have the KAZII. The KAZII was a 12-meter long catamaran that set sail on April 15th of 2007 and was found adrift just 3 days later on April 18th, but without her crew. When the ship set sail, she was carrying 3 crew members, all of which were relatively inexperienced sailors. On April 18th, someone in a helicopter reported seeing the adrift ship, but it wasn't until April 20th that maritime authorities were able to catch up with the boat and board it. It was then, however, that they uncovered the bizarre circumstances on the ship. Everything on the ship was perfectly normal, aside from the fact that the crew had just seemingly vanished. There was a meal set on the table waiting to be eaten, a laptop was open and on, the engine was still running, all of the life vests were on board, and all of the ship's emergency systems were fully functioning. The only out of place things were, of course, the missing crew, the fact that one of the ship's sails was badly shredded, and there was no life raft on board, but it is still unclear whether there ever was one on board. There are many theories as to what may have happened to the crew, but none have ever been substantiated or confirmed, which leaves the fate of the 3 crew members a complete mystery that we may never get the answers to. In our number 8 spot today we have the Mary Celeste. Are you really doing a list of ghost ships if you don't include the Mary Celeste? I don't think so. The Mary Celeste first set sail on November 7th, 1872 with a cargo full of alcohol. What happened over the next month isn't quite clear, but what we do know is that on the afternoon of December 5th of the same year, another ship on the Atlantic crossing found her drifting somewhere between Azores and Portugal. The captain of the ship knew the captain of the Mary Celeste and knew that he was a skilled and capable sailor, so he was extremely suspicious. He ordered a crew to board the Mary Celeste, and when they did, they found that the ship had been deserted, but it was in full seaworthy condition, so why would they have abandoned it? Especially the captain. The captain of the ship that found the derelict split his crew and sailed the Mary Celeste to Gibraltar for more investigations, but despite this, the captain, his wife and child, and the crew of 7 that were on board the Mary Celeste simply just disappeared, and no one knows what happened or where they could have gone. I think this one is so famous because it seemingly has no answers tied to it at all. Like, it really is just one of those mysteries with next to nothing to go off of in terms of clues. In our number 7 spot today we have the SS BAYCHIMO. This ship was first built in Sweden in 1914 and it belonged to the Hudson's Bay Company. This ship was used to trade provisions for pelts in Inuit settlements along the Northwest Territories of Canada, which means that the course it was on was full of icy, freezing waters. On October 1st, 1931, the ship was nearing the end of its trading run and was packed full of fur when it got stuck in some ice. The crew decided the best thing to do would be to briefly abandon the ship and then travel over the ice to get to the nearest town, which is exactly what they did. On October 15th, the Hudson's Bay Company sent an aircraft over which rescued 22 of the crew members, but there were still 15 who were left behind to be saved at a later date. These 15 crew members would periodically return to the ship to move some of the ice and also to grab the cargo and provisions off of the ship. On November 24th, there was a huge storm, and once it cleared, the remaining crew realized that the ship had disappeared. The crew assumed that it had sunk, but that was not the case. Later, an Inuk hunter spotted the ship about 72 miles from the camp that the remaining crew had set up, and somehow they were able to go and locate it. They went there, removed the rest of the valuables, and then abandoned it for the very last time because they did not believe that it would make it through the rest of the winter. The remaining crew was finally rescued, and the next time the ship was seen, it was 480 miles away from the previous sighting. For 40 years after this, the SS BAYCHIMO was periodically sighted, floating through the sea, and sometimes even providing a shelter for those who needed it most. In 2006, the Alaskan government set out on a mission to find the ghost ship, but since the most previous sighting, she has never been seen or located again. Not even a wreck of the ship has been found, so at this point, no one knows where the ship may be. It is still one of the longest sailing ghost ships of all time, and maybe it is still out there waiting to be found once again. In our number 6 spot today, we have High Aim 6. High Aim 6 left port in Taiwan on Halloween 2002, which just seems like a day that no one should set sail on, you know? But they did anyway. And the next time the ship was spotted, it was found abandoned within an 80 nautical mile range of Australia's Rowley Shoals. The last time contact was made with anyone on the ship was with the captain in December when the boat's owner contacted him and everything seemed fine, but by January there was no one left on board. What's even weirder is that when the ship was found, the engines were fully fueled and running, all of the crew's personal belongings along with all provisions were still on board, and there was no obvious signs of any kind of of damage or struggle. It's like everyone on board just vanished. To further this mystery, one crew member ended up being found and taken into custody, and when questioned, apparently they said that the crew of the ship had mutinied, but gave no reasons as to why or answers on where everyone else could be. In our number 5 spot today we have the ocean wave. Bas Jan Adder was a Dutch conceptual and performance artist as well as a skilled sailor. He set sail on July 9th, 1975 in a ship called the Ocean Wave as he was setting sail to make his single-handed west to east coast crossing of the North Atlantic. He estimated that his trip was going to take around 2.5 months, but it wasn't until 9 months after he set sail that his boat was found unmanned, floating almost vertically in the water. The people who found the ship were Spanish fishermen who then took the boat back to Spain, where it ended up being stolen. Throughout all of this, Bas was nowhere to be found, and even still, over 40 years later, the mystery of what exactly happened remains. There are people who speculate he fell overboard in heavy bad weather, but of course this is impossible to tell, especially with neither the boat or Bas to provide evidence. The information to go on has only been what was provided by the people who saw the boat before it was stolen, so of course that is not nearly enough to really have any questions answered. In our number 4 spot today we have the HMS Resolute. The ship was a British Royal Navy ship that was abandoned and later found in 1854 drifting near the coast of Baffin Island in the Canadian Arctic. The crazy thing is that this ship had initially set out to find the remains of another lost ship, but it somehow managed to end up with a similar fate. The ship was found lodged in ice with no crew aboard at all, and not one single member of the crew has ever been found since. Those who boarded the ship were met with a strange scene as they entered the ship, as everything seemed to be in perfect order. The captain's cabin was seemingly just as he had left it, with a teapot, Bible, and a couple glasses full of alcohol. There was a British flag left draped over the ship commander's chair. No one has ever been able to figure out what happened on that ship, why the crew abandoned it, or where they went. The ship was eventually recovered and retired, however, and the wood from it was apparently used to create the Resolute desk, which sits in the Oval Office and has been used by most presidents since the 19th century, which is a kind of cool but very eerie fact. In our number 3 spot today we have the Zhang Sen. In 2006 the Australian Coast Watch found a ship floating out at sea that was completely empty with a broken tow rope. Finding a ship floating with no one on board is always a strange kind of mystery, but things only got more mysterious from there on out. Investigators had absolutely nothing to go off of that could give them any kind of clues. The name of the ship was printed on the side, but that's it. There was nothing else to identify the ship, there were no documents or belongings, no reports of missing boats, no records of distress signals, like literally nothing. They can't even figure out who it belonged to or where it came from. Their best guess is that the ship was possibly used to supply food and fuel to fishing boats, but that does not explain why no one tried to save it or even look for it. Was there someone on it when it got lost? Who knows? In our number 2 spot today we have the SS OURANG MEDAN. This ship is one of the most notorious ghost ship stories out there, and honestly it totally makes sense why. This story is so fascinating. The legend goes that in 1947 there was a cargo ship off of the coast of Indonesia which put out a distress call. The call stated, "All officers including captain are dead, lying in chart room and bridge, possibly whole crew dead." Okay. Not good already, but things quickly got worse when, before help could arrive, there was a second message radioed in that was just 2 words: "I die." By the time help arrived at the ship, those who boarded were welcomed with a gruesome sight. All of the crew members were found deceased with their bodies in strange positions, but there were no obvious signs of injury, so how the heck did they die? Well, unfortunately, before any kind of investigation could be done to answer that question, a fire which started in the engine room ended up ravaging the entire ship, which ultimately sank. To this day, there are still debates about what exactly happened, how these people died, and if the ship was even ever real. What do you guys think? In our number 1 spot today we have OCTAVIUS. The Octavius set sail from England in 1761 and was headed to try and find the Northwest Passage. While the Northwest Passage is now free, but still difficult to sail through, in 1761 the chances of making it through the Northwest Passage were much more grim. The passage was the demise of many skilled sailors who were attempting to find an alternate trade route to Asia. So, back to the Octavius, which again set sail from England in 1761. Well, this ship was never seen again until it was found off of the coast of Greenland in 1775. The captain of the ship unfortunately fell into the same trap as many before him, and the ship ended up getting stuck in the Arctic ice. But here's the wildest thing about this particular story. When the ship was found in 1775, 5 men boarded it and found a horrifying scene. The entire 28-man crew was below deck, but all frozen to death. The captain was even found frozen, sitting at his desk, pen in hand. He was writing in his logbook with the last entry coming in 1762. This ghost ship and the crew had been lost at sea for 13 years before they were found. I couldn't even imagine having to enter the ship that day.